My name is Dustin Siebert, and I have the privilege of teaching and coaching, as Doug said, at St. Croix Lutheran Academy. Each day, over 100 junior students sit in front of me, and nearly 500 students walk our halls. One of my favorite things to do is to lead chapel at St. Croix and connect with our kids from that vantage point, and just see where they are, look into their eyes, and try to engage with them where they are in life, because we're trying not to just set them up for high school success. Our goal at St. Croix is to set our kids up for success well into the future. Again, I've been a pastor since 2007 and spent some time at MLC as an admissions counselor, and then St. Peter Appleton as outreach and family pastor, and I've been at St. Croix now since 2016. We had the privilege of being here last year with a room full of people. We're thankful to be back because we want to share with this room, and I want you guys to hear from these young men about what are young people looking for in a church. I want to take you back, though, to begin our discussion here today, to John chapter 6. I want to take you back to Capernaum. And John chapter 6 comes right after Jesus has fed the 5,000. He's started walking on water. And then his disciples and a group of other new disciples, so to speak, started following Jesus. And when they find him finally in the Capernaum, here's what happens. It says, on hearing it, the words of Jesus, many of his disciples said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, "Does this offend you?" From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. "You don't want to leave too, do you?" Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God." Do you sense the problem in this short gospel account here as Jesus addressed his disciples? We sense the problem, right? There's some that stayed and some that left. Why did some leave? Some of the disciples left because the words of Jesus, the words of Scripture, are offensive. They left, no doubt, probably because of pure influence. They left because maybe a little doubt was planted in their mind. And I think the more things change, the more they stay the same, don't they? To many in the world, right, the words of Jesus are offensive. We're going to hear from these guys just the pure influence that there might be in their lives and struggles that they have. But not only do we hear what the problem is and sense that, we also recognize what the goal is. The goal is for God's disciples, the children that are baptized in our church, the kids that we see walk across for confirmation, those that you connect with during their formative teen years. The goal is for them to have a mindset of Peter. Lord, you have the words of eternal life. We want our kids, to sit at Jesus' feet and to see what a blessing it is to learn from our Savior. And while that's our goal, we have to recognize that there is an issue that is out there. And friends, this isn't a modern issue in the 2020s that we've experienced a tremendous amount of loss of young adults in our church. Just a quick perusal of the seminary website and some of our synod files, and even the theses that are written by our seminary students now will tell us that it's been an issue for quite some time. I'm going to just have a couple quotes for you, and then I'll turn it over to these guys that take me back to my teen years. I was confirmed in 1995, and these words were written by former MLC President Mark Zarling when he was an education professor at the seminary. And I'll just share these with you and sort of just to tee up our conversation that the problem isn't new in 2024. It's something that leaders like you, men like you who cared about the church, were talking about in the 90s. It was something that was happening back in the first century with Jesus too. People were leaving. It says, we wring our hands at the sad statistic quoted above. 40% of each year's confirmads will become inactive by the Sunday after Memorial Day. Whew, that means we have 60% left that we're dealing with in their 14, 15-year range. Of those 60% that I don't know what the stat is, how many leave by the end of summer. But that's tough to see. Pastor Zarling says, do we clasp our hands then in prayer or in resignation? Why should called workers who know their Bible history be surprised at such a statistic? After all, the scriptures have clearly revealed the tendencies of human nature. It only took 40 days for a whole generation to fall away after seeing and hearing the presence of God at Sinai. 6 weeks, and here comes the calf, with a called worker, Aaron, crafting it. The work of keeping kids in the kingdom begins with the Baptist clarion call. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. It is a call that the youth hear from our lips, but also need to see in our lives and observe in our ministries as the leaders of the church. Men called to serve, men called to lead by example as husbands and fathers and workers in the church. Okay? I'm going to back up and share just one more. This is in 1995. This is in 1995, and it makes a connection also to last year's statistics. Author is unknown. I believe this was in one of those like Wells publications that was shared among like called workers, if I'm not mistaken. And it says this: can we stop the bleeding? What's fueling our seemingly apathetic attitude about the problem? Is it that we aren't aware of the daily exodus of high school and college students from our Wells ministries? Does the situation seem too overwhelming to us? Is the bleeding already so out of control that we're walking away from it? There is no doubt the vital signs we do have are less than encouraging. During 1970 and 1993, Wells had backdoor losses over 188,000. In 2023, then, I added these stats. Wells congregations reported having 264,500 community members, a decline of almost 17% from the statistical high of 1990. So here we are in 2024. Same thing that Jesus dealt with in Capernaum, same thing that we see happening at Sinai, same thing that our church leaders like you guys talked about in the late 90s. Now we are here a quarter way through 21st century. And it's our hope today between our panel and myself that we have a renewed sense of passion to wrap our hearts and minds around that. So allow me to introduce our panel. Actually, you guys can introduce yourselves and just ask you this question. You don't want to leave too, do you? So talk about your story and maybe why you haven't left yet, because you're here today.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Caleb Little. I am a junior at the seminary. Seminary does it weird. That means I am a first year at the seminary. And why am I still here? I don't want to leave too, do I? The truth is, it was the Holy Spirit working through the consistent effort of church leaders and role models in my life that kept me in the church. So you guys are going to hear more about that as we go through today's panel discussion. I have some stories to tell, and the reality is, it's all by the grace of God.
My name is Micah Bain. I'm a senior at Martin Luther College right now. Sorry. And I'm studying to be a pastor as well, as Caleb is. And where I credit the fact that I haven't left the church is really my father. He's been an incredible influence on me, and it's one of those things that you didn't really realize till later, like I have when I'm at college now. To give you a picture, he's not a pastor. He's a teacher though, but he's a leader at the churches that he's a member at. I see him engaged as an usher, an elder. He's on committees. He's helping out wherever he can. When he goes to church, I remember bringing the family to church. He's bringing a Bible along with a pen. I mean, he's had an influence on me, I'd say, because what do I do now? I have my Bible and I have my pens with me on hand. And to me, that conveyed, this is something important, going to church. And he's engaged with it, and this is something to participate in as a person. When I was young, leading family devotions at home, even if I wasn't really engaged, we did it. He didn't get mad at me for being clocked out during it. And prayers, driving to school. He built for me, or we did together with my brother. So we memorized a selection of prayers or hymn verses to pray on our drive. And I still know them today. They've stuck with me, and I think it's one of those things that has really come to impact me later on. And I think it really exemplifies the importance of the influence that a father can have. we'll get into that a little bit more later too.
Before Tyler goes, one quick story is I asked the kids at St. Croix, what do you notice about all the teachers in our chapel? Because if you've never been to St. Croix, it's chapel and around. All four sections are facing the altar. And there's one individual that takes his Bible and sits there and writes during chapel. He's paying attention. It's Mr. Boehm. And the quote I always use with our students is, a Bible that's fallen apart usually belongs to someone who isn't. I think it's a Spurgeon quote. A Bible that's fallen apart usually belongs to someone who is. Now, Mr. Boehm has his fair share of moments in life, I'm sure, where he could use a little bit of strength, but that's a really huge example on a lot of our kids at school, is to see someone else intentionalizing that. And I saw firsthand when my car was in the shop, Mr. Boehm used to take me to school. The first time I remember, all of a sudden he starts praying. I'm like, that's really cool. I should start doing that with my kids. And now I do that when I drop my kids off at school. So he doesn't just have an influence on his own kids. He's got influence on his fellow people he works with. So, Tyler.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Halverson. I'm a junior at St. Clair Lutheran this year. I'm in Pastor Siebert's religion class, which is quite a blessing. I've been going to church my whole life since I was 0 years old. And the question is, why am I still here? Why am I still here right now? And the big thing for me that has always been just amazing is the community of the church. In middle school, I went through a lot of doubts, a lot of questions, and I was really struggling in my belief. And I talked to some people older than me, a lot older than me, some youth pastors and mentors, and those people really took me under their wing and helped me understand and gave me comfort in all these questions. And for all of that, I've just stuck with it now, and I remember those truths and just remember to see all the blessings in life that God has given us. So I would say the community has been an amazing part of why I'm still here and standing right now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tyler. Let's start by talking about then, I guess, what's trending among the youth, and then how those trends can become threats.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Siebert. I look out at you guys today, and I don't see a lot of youth out there. There's some young guys out there, but I recognize that you guys might not be all that familiar with what's going on with the youth these days. So I thought I might put together a little presentation here to just kind of tell you what's going on. Now, Pastor Siebert did point out, I am 23. I am not technically a youth anymore, but I've been a leader of youth for the past few years. So for a year, I was a dorm supervisor at St. Croix in the dormitory there with international students, along as helping out in middle school. And for the past 3 years, I've been the Bible study leader at Camp Croy's Strive Teen Camp. So instead of getting a pastor, they get me, and it hasn't fallen apart yet, so that's good. And right now, as well as going to seminary, I'm employed at Lighthouse Youth Center in Milwaukee, helping the kids in the inner city. So what's trendy among the youth? Well, Pastor Siebert.
And also, just to clarify too, we're not just talking about 14 to 18-year-olds. We are looking at that young adult range too. So think about this, the 14 to 24-year-old range. So here we go.
All right, first of all, dancing. The first thing that happens...
I did not approve of that slide.
Put these together by myself. The first thing that happens when I walk into any Lighthouse Youth Center is the kids want to dance with me. They have these TikTok videos set up, and they have like these routines memorized, and they're like, oh, come on, Vicar Caleb. They call us Vicar. It's the cutest thing ever. And they just want to dance. And I'm sure you guys have watched any youth sports games. Oh, kid scores a touchdown, makes a basket, and they're dancing. Their friends are off dancing to the side, and sometimes they're the same one. Fortnite dances are a big thing. Next, we have brain rot. And so they will openly call this brain rot, like they know that this is just pure like nonsense, like nothing good for the brain. But you'll hear things like skibbity toilet riz. Oh, this is like some of their favorite language. And you know what it means? Absolutely nothing. Like there's like very little like internet culture background to it that actually means anything. Sigma points. Sigma is like the reinvention of the cool guy with the shades and leather jacket on. You know, he doesn't need anyone. He's a lone wolf. That's the Sigma guy. And now we have memes. People like to be funny. Here are a few memes I just found real quick. Poop jokes, right? You have if you're really dumb, poop jokes are funny. If you're really smart, poop jokes are funny. But to the average person, they're not funny. This one is actually Hebrew. This is from one of my classmates. It's Lamech doing his fist ever. I killed a man. That's right. One of the first diss tracks raps of all time. And what I want to highlight with all these is that internet culture has boomed among our generations. Generation Z, which I'm a part of, also Gen Alpha, which is coming up not too far behind. And internet culture has brought a lot of people together. It's put a lot of smiles on people's faces. But as we're here today talking about what's going on with our youth, what's the deal, and the truth is, nothing new. Satan's still up to his old tricks. He's still lying, but he's doing it in new ways. And so we're going to see some startling statistics in the next few slides. We kind of laughed here, right? I want you to notice in every single one of these what happens around 2010, a little after. This is the debut of social media as we know it, Instagram, Facebook, whatnot, starting in that age range, which is Gen Z, right? Gen Z, Gen Alpha. We're setting the scene. We see that just a crazy rise in depression. Gen Z and Gen Alpha is more depressed than any generation we've ever known. I mean, maybe wartime, but come on, are we really comparing the statistics to wartime? Mental illness as a whole, anxiety. You see that number for college students goes all the way up to 25% for anxiety. Oh. So this generation is more anxious, they're more depressed, they're suffering, they're in their heads, they're wondering what's going on. They're spending more time alone. This is trendy right now. They spend more time alone. It's crazy how we feel we're more connected than ever. Most people are available at just click their contact name, text them, call them. But look at this. More connection doesn't necessarily mean more friends or time with friends. And studies will show that, Gen Z, Gen Alpha are more lonely than any other generation. Sleep is important. Now, I understand that nobody that I know of, besides some very zealous people, get the right amount of sleep. But, especially when it comes to these formational years, both middle school, high school, we see a decrease in sleep. And once again, you can see that increase in that 2011, 2013 range, where just almost 50% of girls who were part of this survey had less than 7 hours of sleep, which is already less than what the ideal of what you should be getting. Porn is in right now. Talk to some Conquerors Through Christ guys. They have a lot of great resources, but also they tell me that the average age of exposure for porn is 11 years old for a boy in America. Here, this is a study from Sweden. Now, I found, it was hard to find some statistics for America specifically, but 25% of Swedish 12th graders say they use porn almost daily. And let me tell you, our American students are not far off from that.
I think the stat for American students is 75 to 78% around high school teenage boys look at pornography at least once a month or more. Girls, a third of girls are looking at pornography in their high school to college years more than once a month.
They're watching more porn. Next slide.
Which does what to the brain, though, right? It reprograms your brains and then consumes you so that what's to be important is no longer the main thing.
Well, yes. And with internet culture, and something I want to highlight here is that, yes, internet culture, there are lots of great things you can do with the internet. You can reunite lost families. You can reach people with the gospel. For Pete's sake, we have the entire Bible in our pocket. But how is Satan working through this when we give our middle schoolers unadulterated access to social media? Or maybe you don't give them, but their friends do. It's really hard. Life often feels meaningless. I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, okay, I'm part of this generation, but I kind of feel like whenever I watch old movies and stuff, they're not often like, oh man, like, what's the meaning of life? Like, dude, like I just feel like nothing's worth doing anything anymore. A complaint I often have heard from parents is actually like, how do I get my kids to care about stuff? It's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that's something you don't usually have to ask about your middle school kid. How do I get them to care about anything?
Last one.
So these are questions I received. You guys can kind of read through them. Every year at Strive Teen Camp, they get the opportunity to ask me an anonymous question. They write it in, and by the end of the camp, I kind of did this like hour and a half long thing where I rattle through a bunch of answers. Like, all right, like what are you guys not comfortable asking and putting your name to? And so then they ask me things, and some interesting things. 20% of those questions were LGBTQ plus related. I didn't include those because I know there's a separate thing going on about that. But a lot of it just mental health, hopelessness, anxiety, just why would God allow me to do this? And so just to highlight that the devil's not using new tricks, he's still lying like he always does. He's working hard to get the people to believe those lies, but he's using different methods. And so maybe one thing we could think about as churches, right, is how do we combat that? How do we equip churches, to equip parents, to equip kids to defend themselves against the lies of the devil? And are we not properly doing that when it comes to social media? That's all I got for setting the scene. This is the world we live in. Now, Mike, I think you got some more to say about the world we live in.
Micah will talk a little bit more about those threats and the worldviews that are out there and the worldly influences. After this section, we'll make sure we pause, and if there's any questions related to the trending world we live in, these guys are more than happy to field those questions.
Thank you, Pastor. As we think about all those things that Caleb highlighted, also consider how they kind of compound with each other. How do they interact with each other? The lack of sleep, the use of porn, the anxiety, the loneliness, they all compound with each other. And all these influences they build on each other. And the studies show social media has become the biggest influence on children now. And when you think about what the other influences these children have in their lives, what could those be? Their friends, if they have them. As you see, loneliness is an all-time high. There's their parents. If they have both of their parents, broken homes, all-time high. How might that influence them? And the church, if they have a church. I think everyone in this room is aware of how young people, church attendance and membership has plummeted. And all these influences, it's a whirlwind for them. And through social media, what are they consuming then? There's music, there's TV shows, there's movies, all these things. I'm sure you've seen it. It's been developing, and in some sense, it's nothing new. These things have been influencing people for decades already. And with all these things pressing in, it can lead to developing some interesting worldviews, some new worldviews that are very personal and subjective. And this is what you're going to see thrown around probably a lot in the discussion about this. There's subjective morality, or postmodernism, postmodern philosophy. You've probably heard of that. And I want to just give you a brief outline of what that looks like, because you're going to see it pop up and pop up time and time again in all sorts of topics that relate to this. Is postmodern thought and subjectivism. And that worldview is really built upon the fact that every individual is very individual and very subjective. Everyone in this room has a different background. They have different preferences and different biases. And what is built upon that then in the postmodern worldview is is you really cannot arrive at a universal truth because of your biases. And I'm just describing what that's like. I don't condone the worldview. But it creeps in, for sure. And how does this influence them? Caleb, you talked about how parents kind of struggle with, how do I get my kid to care about things? And one of the big things churches struggle with is a general apathy towards spiritual things. Because if somebody is like worried and thinking about the truth, and they're searching for it and seeking for it, then the church can very easily offer them the truth. But what do you do if they don't care about it? Can you make them care about it? It's very difficult. And I think that's because it becomes viewed as generally unimportant. When you're on your own journey, when you're just going to discover your own truth that is true for you, what's the pressure to finding it? You're going to figure it out. Or maybe you won't, and that's okay too. That's your journey, it's your truth. And more than just apathy, there's a general aversion to organized religion that I would want to talk about. In many ways, the church has become known for what it stands against. And this is how people perceive Christianity. What are the number one knocks against the church? I mean, when we start talking about social issues, it's always about homosexuality, or in general, the church's view on sexuality, or sex outside of marriage. There's abortion topics. All these things pop up, and we become known as the church. We become known as what we're standing against. And what's lost in that is the beauty that the church has to offer, and the beauty in the Christian worldview. How we grapple with suffering in life, and how God offers the only solution to it that stands above every other worldview. The beauty in a Christ-centered relationship, romantic or friendships. Let's go back to the Sermon on the Mount and listen to Jesus' teachings. What we have here is the church. It is a gem. It's a treasure. But the world loses sight of that, and youth are losing sight of that. I think that about covers everything I want to say as we expand on the Christian worldview. But any questions?
Are there any questions? Yeah, up to this point, with related to worldviews and what lens the young people are looking at life through.
Well, can I say something? Yeah. Is that all right? So just kind of building off of that, right? I mean, this subjective truth is just whatever makes me happy, that's what's true. And if it doesn't make me happy, then that's not true. And so you have this sort of hedonism, right? This worship of pleasure, putting pleasure at the top, kind of built behind everything we do. We heard it in the service today where he talked about how, all right, the government's in charge of my neighbor. Now I don't have to care about him, and I just get to have as much fun as possible with what I got. But along with like that subjective truth, I've experienced with, and they all just mentioned like the LGBTQ plus community in particular, a push to make your sexual identity, well, your sexual preference your identity. And what that does is it totally diminishes you. It puts you from like a person, like we recognize a child of God, someone who's created, who has a purpose, and it actually diminishes you. All right, now you're just your sexual identity. Yeah, I'm a lesbian. Like, that's who I am. I'm going to be proud of that, man. I'm going to parade that everywhere. And that's what's kind of this hole of identity that's formed. Well, they fill it with something. That's my idea.
Yeah, speaking of identity, let's go to Tyler. 17-year-old at St. Croix. Talk about a little bit, Tyler, where your generation, Gen Alpha, and the 17-year-old junior student finds their identity, social media or otherwise. What do you see and sense from your friends?
Well, one big problem, or just overall, the forming of identity, like Caleb was talking about, where are kids getting this from? Where are they seeing all this LGBTQ? Where are they getting all these thoughts from? And well, I'll tell you, where I see it in my classmates and my peers is I see it in social media. Social media is it's a gift and a curse. And I'm going to talk about the negatives. And just one big problem I see, You saw Caleb presenting it. There's all sorts of these different things that'll rot your brain. But kids, they spend excessive amounts of time on this. I've seen some kids that spend 12 hours a day on social medias, some that spend 3. But around average, I've seen just a lot of kids spending upwards of 6 hours a day on social medias during the school year too. So that is leading to the problem of lack of sleep. But with all these scrolls that they're doing, they're getting fed all this information. Some of it, brain rot, like Caleb said, but some of it is people's opinions and all these kind of agendas. And wokeism is one thing that I said. And all these things, they take them in, and they want to feel accepted, so they accept these into their life, and it helps form their identity into something that they feel that they're getting from these scrolls, because they get that out of these scrolls. So every time they scroll, they see something new, and they're like, oh, I kind of like that. They're building their identity off of these things, and that's where they're putting their truth.
I watched a really informative video from George Barna. Do you know George Barna? He's a renowned researcher just into trends and statistics in the church. And it's 50 minutes long. We don't have time to show it today. But if you go Google George Barna, why are people leaving the church? 15 minutes and like 43 seconds, I think, was the timestamp on it. This was the opening part of his discussion was this. 2 points. 9 different worldviews combine to help an individual establish their own worldview. And he said this: a person's worldview is developed between the ages of a 1.5-year-old and 13 years old. And that worldview is going to define who they are, how they live, the experiences they have, and the lifestyle they adopt. Worldview is so critical because decisions flows through it. So they have a lot of choices from their worldview to adopt and what elements that they're going to bring into their life. And he says what their research continually shows is that kids are not being pointed to adopt a biblical worldview. In other words, a decision-making filter that is based on biblical truth just simply isn't there. And what are young people looking for in a church? They might not know it, but they're looking to be pointed towards something. They need something to fill that hole in their heart. And I guess just putting it back to you guys, number one, how have your eyes been opened to that gap that's in there between young people and the church? And then what's a positive experience that you can talk about to give our room a little bit of hope and a little bit of insight into how we can bridge that gap and help young people who are longing and looking for church to help them? Caleb, maybe you start with your time at North Dakota State.
So right now I'm starting to be a pastor, right? I'm at the seminary, but I actually didn't start at amidst. I started at North Dakota State University. I wanted to be an engineer. I was good at math, science, and all that. Thought I could do it. So I went to public university, and it was there that I found community, but I found community in kind of the wrong places. Within a month, I had gone viral on campus for being a part of a rap battle. In a little, not too long after that, I had a bid to join a frat, and I joined. And I was out there living the life, man. Well, living the life according to the world. Alcohol, yeah, I could get that. Didn't matter that I was 18. Fun, yeah, I was having fun every weekend. It was a blast. Girls, yeah, I could talk to girls. Yeah, no problem. But it was at this point where I probably hit rock bottom. And what kept me in the church, what brought me back to Jesus? I mean, maybe part of that was hitting rock bottom and going back to my roots and being like, oh yes, this Jesus guy, like, he has a purpose for me. That's part of it. But one thing that I'll never forget, and I'm eternally grateful for, are the people, well, Troy. So Troy was the president of the congregation there in Moorhead. And every week he would text me. Every week, without fail. And if he wasn't able to do it, someone else did. And they came and picked me up every Sunday. They had a specific time, a specific place where I was going to be for him to pick me up to take me to church. And every time he was there. And if he wasn't there, someone else from the congregation was there. And when I was there, I was the only guy. I was like the only young person at church. but man, did those people love me. They kind of became like second grandmas to me there. I knew their names, and actually, they still write letters to me. I still they still support me in that way, and I get to see them all the time. But the negative thing that I saw at NDSU, right, just frat culture, just this pursuit of happiness. I wanted to be happy all the time. And how was I going to be happy? I was going to have fun. How was I going to have fun? I was going to drink about it. Which was just so wrong. And it's entirely by the grace of God that I built these relationships and these people put effort into me. And next thing you know, I'm singing carols with them during the winter, and I'm calling my mom saying, hey, I want to transfer to MLC to be a pastor.
So would you say young people are looking for an investment? How would you summarize that?
Are looking to be cared about. Just the amount of care I received from that church, where they were steadfast. Not only did they put that initial investment in, but they every week, weekly, did not give up on me, even if I missed a Sunday because I was probably too hungover or something. They kept at it. And so I think one thing that can underscore our entire conversation is just continuous effort. Not just some big initial investment, but just being consistent with it. You know, sometimes we get this big push and we get it rolling, but then we got to keep it rolling. It doesn't just keep going. It's not downhill. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah, was it Roosevelt that said, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care? In your church, if there's one thing we could say to take away, and we're not quite at the end here yet, but be a Troy. Be a Troy. Who is that young person that you can be Troy to this Sunday or next Sunday or the Sunday after? Be a Troy to that person. To Micah, young people, what they're looking for, I'm going to cue you up with just integration, integrating in their lives. Sometimes that's messy. Sometimes it takes effort. I know you've done some of that in your life, trying to integrate and learn more. How can a room like this integrate into the lives of young people?
Yeah, thank you. I think when looking at the younger generation and what they're dealing with and the things they're doing, maybe it's going out and partying every Friday night, Saturday night, even Thursday night, Thursdays is a thing. Maybe it's, the pride movement that has just taken off. And we look at these things, and it's very easy as the church, I've done it myself, to just scoff at it. Like, how can they participate in something so immoral? And like, what's happened to common sense anymore? Maybe someone in this room have thought similarly.
And real quick, what he's talking about, guys, these aren't those kids. These are our kids. Kids that were church, just so we don't try to make that comparison here in our heads, like, oh, those kids that have never been in church. These are our kids that he's referencing right now, that we have to recognize that are not just back door losses, there are front door losses that are getting enveloped by what they've talked about already today, the Marxist movement, the moral relativism that's out there, the identity through your sexual relationships and pursuits and so on and so forth. So these aren't those kids, these are our kids. Ones we want in church, back in church, building relationships with. So I just want to make sure we bridge that gap here for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think about it just troubles me to think how many of those people may have been failed by a Christian influence in their life. But, okay, this creates distance between us if we act that way. And I was thinking about this, I was like, man, every year, during the same month, for an entire month, like gay pride festivals are held. And we talk about these problems and these needs, the loneliness in this generation. And I think we start seeing opportunities in them too. And exactly how Christ and his church step up to these opportunities. And I mean, why do you think that boy has found himself at a gay pride event? Maybe because that is the first place where he has actually found a community, a solid community that he can participate in. And there's other things attached to that. There's other reasons. But this past summer, I went to a Pride event to start talking to people, talking Christianity. And it was very out of my comfort zone. But I was driving by, I saw all the flags and all these booths set up, all these bright colors. I was like, I had no plans today. Let's go see what comes of this. And I quickly wrote up a few questions I just want to talk to people about. And one of the big questions I asked was, what does this event mean for you? Why are you here? One of the booths I went up to, they were advocating for some sort of petition, some legal action. And this booth was manned or run. It was run by 3 high schoolers and a middle-aged woman off the side. And I mainly talked to the 2 high schoolers on the right. One was transgender, the other they were using some of their pronouns. I don't remember. But you get the picture, and I was talking to them. They're high schoolers running this thing. And I asked them, what does this mean for you? Why are you here? And their answer, not just only their answer, but everybody I talked to there, was community. And when there's this great distance between our community and their community, at some point there has to be, what gives? There has to be some point of contact. At some point we have to engage with this. We have to talk. We have to build a relationship. There's no way around that. And what adds to the difficulty here is I also asked, what do you think it would take to bridge the gap between the Pride movement and Christians? Now, in our conversation, we had arrived at Christian nationalists, specifically the Christians who stand against homosexuality in the Pride movement. What does it take to bridge that gap? And every single person really saw no hope in bridging that gap. And their answer was, well, they have to take on a more open mind. The prerogative lied on them. And to me, that seems as hopeless on their part. But what does it take on our part to maybe explode a stereotype or two and step across that divide? And I think of who Christ ate with. And I think of what the Pharisees accused him of, eating with sinners. But somebody had to do it. As Jesus said, he didn't come for the healthy, but for the sick. And I think that is a necessary first step of integration and building that community and building these relationships.
Thank you, Mike. I think there's lots of statistics out there that would show not just young people, but older folks alike feel distance from the church because of a lack of integration or the feel that the church is full of hypocrites and so on and so forth. And we're not asking you to go to the next Pride event in your local community here. But if I could take anything away from what Micah said there, it's just be open to a difficult conversation with someone you wouldn't normally talk to. Because think about church on Sundays. Who do you normally talk to at church? And I am guilty of this as well. I talk to Drew, and I talk to Dave, and I talk to Matt. Who do I hang out with on Saturday night? Drew and Dave and Matt. Because all our kids are the same age, and they all come over and they play in the backyard, or they have fun, and the adults eat pizza and drink beer and all that good stuff. And then we go to church, we see each other on Sunday. Who do I talk to? Drew, Dave, and Matt. Is that good? No. So our ask of you with what are young people looking for in a church is adults who are willing to stretch themselves a little bit and maybe have a difficult conversation. The first conversation might not be the easy conversation, but it's knocking on the door of building a little trust with that student who just maybe in their eyes, you can see they look a little lost. And also don't write off the kids who seem like they have it all together either. Because those kids might need our help just as much as the kids who look like they're falling apart. Because whether you're 13 years old or 37 years old or 73 years old, we're all good at wearing masks, right? We're all good at wearing masks. And young people who feel invested in, like Caleb did at NDSU, young people who feel like they're being integrated in some way, shape, or form, how cool is that someone came up and talked to them and didn't just have coffee with Dave, Drew, and Matt. And I love Dave, Drew, and Matt. We're probably going to get together tomorrow. After church. After church, okay? So we've talked about investment. We've talked about integration. Tyler, do you have one more thing to add to that?
Can I say one more thing?
And then we're going to Tyler on disconnect to reconnect.
To shape this a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a difficult conversation at some point, probably. But, I mean, my experience of that side of it actually was not at all a difficult conversation. And I didn't hide the fact that I was Christian. And just me saying that, I was expecting, like, them to bristle up a little bit, like, oh man, what's he doing here? They weren't. And they were like, oh, it's cool. Christians are cool people. And we just had a conversation. We talked happily. I got to know him a little bit. It was friendly. So it doesn't have to be all intimidating, and I don't want us to shrink back in fear of it being so difficult, because I think sometimes that can be exaggerated a little bit. But that's all I'm
and nor are you going to change their worldview in one conversation either. But I don't know who was it that said, maybe it was Luther. Just put a pebble in their shoe. Is that Luther? No, who was it?
Greg Kugel.
There you go. Thank you. And we'll go with Luther too. It's reference. But anyways, just put a pebble in their shoe. Put a pebble in their shoe, and see what the Lord can do. Right? The word doesn't return empty. Knock on the door of trust. Tyler, I want to go back to you for a minute here about the. Go, please. Yeah. Go for it, Ms. Krieger.
So maybe two pieces. Just approaching youth. So I've had kids that are now last year, the youngest one's last year in college.
Already?
So as the rare youth may come through our home congregation, it's a little smaller church. But I've got maybe a 30% hit rate, meaning that when I talk to them, they're responsive and receptive, and they typically might be the more conservative kids. So if there is one, it often ends up just feeling a little weird and like, why is this old guy talking to me and what does he want from me? Rather than appreciative of the connection that I'm trying to make. So I don't know where the question is in there, but I don't have any tips.
No, I hear you. Like, again, some of us do go to smaller churches. I'm a vacancy pastor at a church where if we get more than 44, it's a good Sunday. Pilgrim in Minneapolis. Thank you. I'll wait for you afterwards. Yeah. If it's more than 44 where it's a good Sunday and there's one young family in church, tough stuff. How do, is the question sort of like how to get past sort of the awkwardness, the initial awkwardness there to feel...
Tips and advice. I don't know where the question is exactly.
No, that's fair.
Sometimes it just comes off weird and I don't even know where to go with it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Short answer, though.
Question. I mean, in the end, it's really tough because at this point we're doing triage, right? All right, like how do we get them back into the church? These conversations can be awkward. My encouragement would be, how do you build any relationship with anyone? And just, how do you meet your friends? Or are you married? Your wife, right? You spent time with them, you talked with them, you listened to them, you went and did things together. And so sometimes in order to get youth out to do something, all it takes is inviting them out. And it will be awkward at first, absolutely. We speak different languages sometimes, as I was kind of mentioning earlier. So just building relationships.
Yeah, and youth pick up on fakeness too, right? So I would say...
Humans do.
Absolutely. Be as sincere as you can for as long as you can. And if they perceive it, that you're the old guy and they're the young person and it doesn't quite work right away, I would say don't give up on it. See what happens there. Yeah. Do you have something to add to that?
Yeah.
We're running out of time already, so we gotta go quick.
One point of opportunity, this can be hard because it's not going to apply to every youth. But if they're in high school and you know what high school they're from, I would encourage you to start going to some of those high school events. Go to the game, go to the concert, or the theatrical production, because that's already a point of common ground. You can talk about them, talk about with them. And hopefully they see that. And that might require some consistency. And you have right there a point of contact that you can speak about with later. But go to their things, because you can invite them to come along with you, which is good, but they might be a little uncomfortable with that. So first, go to their things. You know what I mean? Just a thought.
Right.
You want to get into like practical ways?
In a second, yeah. Tyler has a practical way here. We talked about worldly influences, social media. You said like the average kid spends 6 hours or so a day on social media. Talk to this group about what your church does to help young people out when you go to, like, what's your Bible study like? What are some of the themes that come up in Bible study and what those relationships look like? Because he's living it day to day. These guys are almost all grown up now. But they've lived their lives too in a unique way. But yeah, talk about the phone use and the things like that.
So for me, I've started going to a Bible study, so junior senior Bible study, it's Sunday night. And it's an amazing environment. I feel like I've grown, honestly, most recently from that. But one thing that we really focus on in junior senior Bible study and in the church that I go to is opening up the Bible, really experiencing God's Word. And in our Bible study, it's fairly relaxed. We're not super uptight. We keep it an open conversation, but one thing that we focus on is getting to the Word. And what we do often is we read these passages once or twice, sometimes 3 times, to really see what is God saying to us, how does this reflect in our lives, and how can we use this in our upcoming week. So that's one great way, I think, is just making sure that you bring the Bible into the young people's lives and just making sure that they can read that book and understand it. And another thing that we do for my church's youth group and just Bible study, and we've kind of made it a practice in all of our church, is this term, we call it disconnect to reconnect. And so what this means is that when we're in this setting, like a church or a youth group, we try to limit our use of our phones. So we don't make it this tight law. We don't want it to be this awkward, uptight thing where if you get caught on your phone, you get in trouble. No. If you need to send a text, you can send a text, but we want people to engage in the community together and not just end up sitting on their phone. So we call it disconnect to reconnect, so that we can reconnect with others and reconnect with the Lord in our time that we spend in church and in our community.
Cool. Let's see. And the time we have left, again, feel free. We'll leave a few questions at the end. Doug, question? 5 minutes. Yep. I got you. Earlier, we set the stage with some of the definitely the challenges and why young people are searching in life. The culture that's there, the depression, the anxiety, the pornography, the emotional and stressful things that they go through, and the aloneness. Let's, again, finish here with positive ways that we can model and re-engage with the youth.
Yeah, so we know why, right? We spend the majority talking about, like, what's going on here? Why aren't they coming? But how do we do it? That's what we want to get to. And I kind of said earlier, like, effort. It takes not just like one big push and then the ball's rolling, it'll fund itself. That's kind of the way a lot of churches do it. I call it the critical mass method. If only we get enough youth at one time, then we'll just keep growing and we have a great youth. That's not really how it works, unfortunately. What does work are relationships. And so putting that consistent effort into relationships. And one thing, I kind of hesitate to say this because it says something about me, but make sure they know your name. When I used to go to a church, I know these people, well, maybe I think these people care about me. I didn't know their names, even if I've been going there for years. So make sure that they know your name, and if possible, reach out to them. And, hey, how was your game on Friday night? That was cool, you guys won. Be interested in their lives. Don't just fake be interested.
Micah, talk about Northcross a little bit.
I think one of the big positive experiences I've had with the church is going to North Cross in Lakeville, because going there, it becomes very obvious. They have this event called Next Gen, and even if very few kids were attending, and sometimes there's not that many, sometimes there's more. No matter what, it is obvious that they are invested in their youth ministry. When I go there, I see one of their pastors. He's a leader in their church. I see him present. I see him engaged. And I think of some other efforts where maybe a church leader isn't present. Maybe you notice it, maybe you don't, but it makes a difference. And that pastor's there overseeing, and at the same time, I'm seeing some youth there, maybe some older kids, maybe college or later in high school, who have taken some leadership under the oversight of the pastor, of course. But they're leading discussion, they're directing people, they're organizing the event. And seeing that, it told me, as a kid going to this thing, like, I see these people here, there's a place for me here, and, well, that's clear because there's a place for them here. And sometimes that investment, it might be monetary, but most importantly, it's people power, it's time, it's effort, there's energy and intentionality.
So I love what Micah said, and I've been to Next Gen too. I think it's an amazing experience, but what stood out to me when I was at Next Gen and why is the community really strong? Well, what I noticed and what I really thought of when I broke it down is I'm a high schooler and I'm going through all these social media problems, influences, all of these things. But the fact that I can go and worship the Lord who I love with other believers, some non-believers, but people that are going through the same journey as me, I think it's amazing that we get the opportunity to do it together and that we can grow together. And it's just amazing to see all that. And it's also amazing to see how much the adults invest in it, college leaders, pastors, everyone, the worship team, everyone pouring into us because they do understand that, it's hard and it's not easy being a teen or just a young adult as a Christian. But I think the community and worshiping together with like-minded people is an amazing environment and something that is definitely needed to be focused on.
We're almost up out of time. Apologize for the technological issues at the beginning that cost us a few minutes. But if I could share one last thought with you, and then again, any last questions we'll take or is come up and talk to these guys afterwards. You've heard about investment. It's a big deal. Integration with your kids. And what these guys just said reminded me of this. And challenge your home pastors of this. If you're a pastor here today, think about this for yourself. How are you building a worship service with the teenager in mind as well, with the young adult in mind as well? Do your sermon illustrations, do your sermon anecdotes, do Bible class discussions have young adult conversation components to it? So again, think about the body of work there on Sunday and think about everybody that we get to minister to. Young kids, young adults, middle age, retirement age, and I know it's a challenge, but to just consider and ask yourself the question, is this designed with this group in mind? I think that could be one place to start for our churches, small or big alike. Designing worship, thinking about writing a sermon, including anecdotes and illustrations for the young adults, for the 20-somethings, for the 30-somethings who feel a little bit disenfranchised or are just hanging by a thread. The one thing we haven't mentioned yet that I wanted to get into but that we didn't is we talked a lot about the young adults and what they're going through and how we can solve it. Honestly, guys, it also starts with the parents, and that may be even more critical than the young adults. If kids and worldviews are being shaped by the time they're 13, our churches and our church leaders need to intentionalize walking alongside our parents. The parents are the most critical role in the lives of our kids. And I know a lot of parents want their church to raise their kids. I understand. I was a youth pastor once, and pastor, can you take my kid bowling or paintballing, all that good stuff? And the parents wanted the church to do the hard work. Let's help the parents do the hard work as churches. And if we can get to the parents right away at birth and help them and walk alongside of them, our prayer is that by the time they get to those formative years, they've established a little bit of a more solid foundation than what they would have had otherwise. And maybe the church, or it's not the parents, but we provide the mentoring for kids who come from homes that are lacking parents and things like that too. So think about how we can provide mentorship and assistance for the individuals who are raising the kids who are our kids, okay? They're not their kids, they're our kids. So, and they're looking, and we have a great opportunity to share God's love with them. So I thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. If anyone has any follow-up questions, we'll hang out up here. These guys would be happy to share. Doug, thanks for having us.